My name is Tom, and I am a techaholic. And just to make sure that I'm in the right room, I'd like to start by asking for a show of hands if there is anybody in this audience that owns more than maybe 2-3 devices. Mobile phones, tablets, hard to see. Yep, okay, that's good. And how many of you would perhaps confess that at times you might spend more time than you probably should on said devices? Yep, there's a few of us. And finally, how many of you know full well, but do it anyway, either pick up your phone the first thing in the morning or look at it the last thing at night? Okay, thank God for that. All right, I'm in the right place, right? So what I want to speak to you about today is to look at this acceleration in innovation and technology and see the effects that it is having on our world and our lives. We are propelled at these warp-like speeds, and I would like to share my journey in trying to learn to navigate this new world, and also share some ideas that might be useful for all of us as we move into this new thing. And my journey starts as this little cheeky nerd kid here. I've always had a fascination and thirst for knowledge. I wanted to know how things work, continually taking things apart and then putting them back together again. And I remember when I was 7 years old, my brother got a Dukes of Hazzard Scalextric set, right? Whoa. This was a status symbol. For a kid or boy growing up in the 80s, we didn't have Xboxes then. We had these, and it was a status symbol. And one day, I was at school with my best friend Mark, and I said, Mark, John's not going to get home early, so we're going to go home back to ours. I've got to show it to you. It's amazing. So the school bell rang, we ran home, we darted through my front door into my brother's house, found the box, opened it up, just took a sniff. We were greeted by that Scalextric smell, right? Does anybody know that smell? If you've played Scalextrics, you will know that smell, and it just intoxified us. We were like electrified, and we jumped straight in, and we set up the kit and put up the track and everything. We sat down, and we went, it's not working. And we tried to move things around. Is it the track? Is it the cars? But nothing that we did would get it to work. So what does a curious 7-year-old do to his brother's pride and joy? I took out one of these, and I took out another one for Mark, and I handed it over, and we went on, and we completely destroyed that Scalextrics. Every tire, every wire, every motor came out. We obliterated it. And I'll never forget my brother's face as he walked into the room. Silent. And then he pointed out one tiny little thing. He went, Tom, you haven't plugged it in. I've edited that, by the way. It wasn't exactly like that. But needless to say, we had missed the obvious. We were so caught up in this excitement that we had missed the most obvious. And if you're like me, that loves detail and analysing and taking things and looking for cryptic messages, I sometimes miss the obvious. So, since then, thankfully, I've developed into a more mature adult, perhaps, and I'm more constructive than destructive. And I'm quite lucky. Technology has done some great things for me. I'm in a job where my passion follows me. I essentially decipher algorithms and find trends in data and information to help businesses give insight and give direction. So it's followed me, and the greatest thing is I have technology to thank me for this, because my job didn't exist 25 years ago. So I've had the luxury of exploring this new world and this new field and traveling the world, meeting some great people, some great minds, and exploring this together. And it's been greatly successful, and I've accelerated, and I've even hit some key lifestyle milestones, which for a technical guy is quite major ones. I met a girl. I fell in love. I got married. And we had 2 wonderful children, and then I started to run a successful business. And all of a sudden, with success, there came more demand. And if it wasn't at work, or if it was at home, or with the kids, or the friends, or the family, everybody wanted the attention. And very quickly, I felt that I was overwhelmed. It really hit me. And I crashed. And I broke down. And the worst thing of all is I lost my greatest tool. I just couldn't think straight anymore. And worst of what the worst is I became numb and disconnected to those that meant the most to me. And I wasn't having that. So what do? Well, you know what I do. I took this out. But this time I started to go to work in terms of taking myself apart, figuring out what was going on and how I was going to resolve this. So my first step was essentially to come back to the basics and start to think, well, what are my needs? What is really important? And I knew about knowledge I needed to learn. And I needed to succeed and grow, because after all, that is why we pursue knowledge. It is to grow, to improve, even to pass on. And a critical thing, like for most of us, I think connection is the most important thing. I don't think there's anybody in this audience that, when it boils down to it, wouldn't say that the other human beings that they share this world with are not the most important thing. And clearly for me, I needed more time. I wasn't using it well, and I wasn't spending time on the things that I should be. So after coming up with this, I then started to think about, well, what environment do we live in? And here's a view of data that I've collected about accumulated human innovation over the last 6,000 years. And you don't really need to be a statistician to work out what's happened here. Okay? Our acceleration and innovation is phenomenal. And over the last 100 years, you could argue, we've begun to hit warp speed. But certainly with the introduction of computer technologies and the advancement in microprocessors and the like, we have hit speeds of unbelievable rates. And we're doing things like taking pictures of black holes 318 quadrillion miles away, confirming concepts and ideas that we've come up with our own minds and taken on and built on from those before us. There's people in this room, it is believed, that will perhaps visit the moon if forecasts are right. And somewhere, right now, perhaps even in this school, there are children that are studying. And those are going to be the first children that lay their first feet or visit Mars. It's pretty crazy. But for me, the key crown, the jewel in the crown, if you like, has to be the internet. And I've been fortunate enough to grow up with it before and after. And it is incredible. For knowledge, well, we've never known such a great source of information. We're no longer bound by the people that we know or the books that we have. And in terms of success, well, we can tap into the minds of the greatest thinkers in any, quite literally, any given subject, and we can build from that. And connection, well, this is a whole talk in itself, but we are hyper-connected. I moved to Africa when I was 8. I moved with my mum and my sister, and I left behind my other siblings and my dad. It has nothing to do with the Scalextrics, by the way, just to point out. But we moved across there, and we were 3,000 miles away, and the only form of communication that I had with the rest of my family was maybe a letter, or we'd walk 2 to 3 miles to the nearest phone that we could make an international call, and hope that somebody was just happened to be sat at home. And it's incredible, the change. Whereas a few weeks ago, I was sat having breakfast with my family, and my mum was there. But she was in New Zealand and on an iPad, and she was about to go to bed, telling us about her day. We were telling her about what we were going to do. It is truly, truly incredible. But like with anything really good, it does beg the question, does this luxury come at a price? Are there consequences to these benefits? And I think if we look at things like our connections, that's one route to look at, a whole talk in itself. However, if we look at like the amount of information that we are digesting and receiving, that's another area that we need to explore. Because this is 24 hours in my life, and on the left here you've got interactions through various mediums, emails, text messages, IMs, those kind of things. And here we have other things that I call, they're in my circle. I could dip into them if I wanted to. And I did some rough maths on this, and it turns out that if you wanted to read it all, it would be the equivalent of the first book of Game of Thrones. And that's in one day. That book took me months to read. And it begs the question, how do we cope with this? And I'm not even a real popular guy. I'm sure there's people out here that receive way, way more than this. And the question is, well, where do we focus our attention? How do we filter and find the signal in the noise? And one thing we can be certain of is this will only accelerate. So we will get more information and more communication at our heart. And for some of us, that's not a problem. But for others, like myself, we all know somebody that's just struggling with the day-to-day pace of life. If you add this on top, then it increases and causes other problems. So there could be friends or family members, sons, maybe even daughters. And this is my daughter. And it makes me think. I was climbing up trees, building dens, bow and arrows, those kind of things. And my daughter's grown up, and she has, and I have to caveat this, restricted access to an iPad and technology. I'll get in trouble if I don't say that. But no, I think as a parent, there's only so much that I'm going to be able to restrict. There's going to become a time where I will have no control over it. And this is all in its infancy, and we have to beg the question, as we haven't had time to really appreciate and see the effects of these things. And yes, they bring some amazing things, but are there other consequences? And that's something I believe we need to explore. So from looking at this, I then thought, right, I know the environment, I know my needs, I want to look at what the options are. And there are loads of options. If you're feeling overwhelmed or if somebody's out there, there's lots of different activities or things that you can do to resolve or bring peace. But the problem for me is this, although these are all great and I'd recommend them all, they didn't bring a permanent change. They were short-term solutions. And it wasn't until I had another obvious moment, and I could almost hear my brother screaming at me saying, "It's right in front of you, how can you miss it?" And you see, I work and I help businesses navigate this digital world. Okay? And just like us, businesses are overwhelmed with information, with choice, with data. They have so much data that they don't know what to do with it. And often they compare and they look what others do and think, that's the right solution for me. And just like people, that's not often the case. Seldom is. So in our job, it's about trying to look into these things and give guidance and give direction so that they can focus on the things that are most important to them. And I thought, well, if this works for businesses, why can't I do this by myself? So that's what I did. I started to explore. And I started to look into various business models and using this as a mechanism to essentially fix myself. And with us, where we start with, Simon Sinek was mentioned earlier, I think by Mark, an incredible talk if you haven't watched that, The Power of Why in his books. But essentially they talk about focusing, and businesses that are really successful are ones that really understand their why. Those that really understand and can answer those deep questions, those very hard to answer questions of values, beliefs, passions, vision, objectives, goals. And I thought, right, well, let's go to town. Let's go around this and let's start looking at it. So in terms of the why, I started thinking about, well, what are my values? And what are my goals and success? And what does my vision look like? And I started to build a picture and started to take that and put it up there. And then from there, I started to think, well, obviously I don't have any products, but I do. Those are my passions. They are what I give to the world. They are my talents. They are my skills. Strengths and weaknesses. So again, I started to build an image of importance and add those to that. And my audience, well, they're the relationships that I have. Family and friends, of course, but there are colleagues, there are peers, there are people that inspire us. There are those people that I'm too afraid to contact because I hold in such high adulation. And again, I put this in there. And obviously, factory-wise, well, if you're unable to push a product through a factory, it isn't any use to anybody. In context to us, that is our bodies. So that has to go up there as well. And as for customer, in a world of I am the customer. And it is my responsibility to monitor and maintain and understand my satisfaction and my progress and to monitor that. So all this came together to pick up put together a visual element of what I used as a core reference point for what is important. And it doesn't matter what it looks like. The most important thing is taking the time to really look and define it. Because once you have an end in mind, then that makes navigation and choices and decisions incredibly much more easy. And in the process of doing this, I discovered what I refer to as attention anchors. Okay? And these are the things that, in a nutshell, they anchor us to that vision of where we wish to go to. And they can be goals, they can be questions, they could be people, they could be images, quotes. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is that locks you in on what is most important to you, that is what I refer to as an anchor. And some of the ways that I use these is, for example, if I'm lots of things to do and I don't know where to start, I just put them up against what is important to me. And some of those things, that will define where I spend my time, where I focus my attention. Because ultimately, as a society, if we are going to increase and accelerate at such a warp speed, then we need to become absolute masters in attention and focus. And other examples of this might be questions such as, I ask myself, have I spent quality time with my kids today? And that's simply something that I've just sat down and thought really hard about, is what does that mean? What do I wish to give to them? Or finally, there's a great example of the Olympic rowing team. Now, they didn't refer to it as anchors, but I see it as exactly like that. They came up with a simple mantra that was, will it make the boat go faster? And that single one question aligned a whole team of people to bring utmost clarity and focus on what was most important. It helped them make choices. It helped them focus on what was most important. So my call to you is to actually take some time to think about what are the things that are most important to you and to go out there and find those anchors so that we can survive and thrive in this fast-paced world. Because with this great tech comes great responsibility. I think we're all still learning its effects and how to use it. And if anybody out there is a similar techaholic to me, then I would say follow these 3 steps. The first one is awareness, and it is to stop. There is a great saying of, you must slow down to speed up. Well, I say, stop. Take time, step out of the noise, and begin to build that picture of what is most important to you. And from that, you should be able to develop these anchors that will help you focus your attention. Because most often, it is the most obvious things that are our truest source of power. Thank you.